Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. Today we are diving into something pretty meta, using podcasts to learn English.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're using the very medium to boost our language skills. We've got a really interesting podcast episode all lined up to unpack, and I can't wait to dig into the most actionable tips and intriguing insights with you.
I think it's fascinating how podcasts can provide such an immersive experience for language learners.
I know, right? It's like having a window into authentic English conversations. Something the textbooks often miss.
Absolutely. I mean, textbooks can be helpful, for grammar rules and structured learning, but they often lack the natural flow and nuances of real life conversations. Podcasts kind of bridge that gap beautifully.
I completely agree. Think about when's the last time you used a textbook phrase like "how do you do" in a casual conversation? Probably never. But with podcasts, you're exposed to the kind of language that native speakers actually use. Slang, idioms, everyday expressions.
Yeah.
It's a goldmine for anyone looking to improve their fluency.
And it's not just about the vocabulary, You also get a sense of the rhythm and intonation of spoken English, like how words are stressed, where pauses naturally occur. These are subtle but crucial aspects of language that can really make a difference in how you sound.
It's like getting a free pronunciation lesson with every episode.
Exactly.
And here's another thing I love about podcasts. You're exposed to different accents and speaking styles. It's like having a diverse group of English-speaking friends from all over the world.
Oh, that's a fantastic point. It helps you develop a more flexible and adaptable ear for English, which is essential for understanding different speakers in various situations.
Exactly. And let's not forget the control factor. You're in the driver's seat with podcasts. You can pause, rewind, listen as many times as you need to until that tricky phrase clicks. This is especially helpful for our listeners, who are all about learning at their own pace and mastering the details.
It plays into the learner's strengths beautifully. They can really digest the information, go back and solidify their understanding without feeling rushed or overwhelmed.
Yeah. Plus, let's be honest, textbooks can sometimes feel a bit dry and academic. But with podcasts, you can choose topics that genuinely excite you. Whether you're into history, true crime, comedy, or anything else under the sun, there's a podcast out there waiting to capture your interest.
And that's where the magic really happens, isn't it? When you're genuinely engaged with the content, learning becomes almost effortless. You're not just memorizing words and grammar rules. You're absorbing the language naturally and enjoying the process.
Absolutely. So let's say I'm ready to jump into the world of podcasts for language learning, but with millions of options out there, where do I even begin? It can feel a bit overwhelming.
Right. It's like stepping into a massive library with endless shelves of books. But don't worry, there are a few simple strategies you can use to navigate this vast world and find podcasts that are perfect for your language learning journey.
Okay, give us the inside scoop. What are your top tips for finding that perfect podcast match?
Well, the first and most important tip is to start with your interests. What are you passionate about? What topics make you want to learn more? Even if you're already interested in the subject matter, you'll be more motivated to listen. And that motivation is key for consistent learning.
So if I'm a history buff, I could search for podcasts about historical events or figures. Or if I'm a foodie, I could look for podcasts about cooking or different cuisines. It's about aligning the learning experience with something I already enjoy.
Precisely. When you're hooked on a topic, you're not even thinking about the fact that you're learning a language. It just happens naturally as you're absorbed in the content.
And that makes the entire process more enjoyable and sustainable in the long run. But it's not just about interest, right? There's also the matter of finding a podcast that matches your current level of English.
Absolutely. You want to challenge yourself without feeling completely lost. Luckily, there are plenty of podcasts specifically designed for English learners, often categorized by level: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. These podcasts often use clearer pronunciation, simpler vocabulary, and might even provide transcripts to help you follow along.
That's a great starting point for anyone who's feeling a bit intimidated by diving into native-level podcasts right away. Do you have any recommendations for those learner-friendly podcasts?
Oh, definitely. ESL Pod and British Council are excellent resources with a wide range of episodes covering various topics. They often break down grammar concepts, explain vocabulary and context, and provide opportunities for practice.
Those are great suggestions. And as you gain confidence and fluency, you can gradually branch out and explore podcasts on topics that interest you, even if they're not specifically designed for language learners. It's a journey, and it's all about finding what works best for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And here's another tip I find helpful. Before you commit to an entire episode, take a minute to read the description. It often gives you a preview of the content, vocabulary, and overall tone of the podcast.
That's such a smart move. It's like peeking into a book before you buy it. You want to make sure it's something you'll actually enjoy reading. It can save you so much time and potential frustration.
Exactly. You can quickly gauge whether the podcast is at the right level for you and whether the topic truly sparks your interest. And speaking of frustration, remember that it's perfectly normal not to understand every single word when you're starting out. It's part of the process.
That's such an important reminder. I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect right away, and that can be discouraging. Instead, focus on gradual progress, celebrate the small wins, and remember that every little bit of exposure to the language helps.
It's like learning any new skill. It takes time, practice, and patience. Don't get bogged down by the things you don't understand yet. Instead, focus on the joy of discovery, the excitement of unlocking new words and phrases, and the satisfaction of gradually improving your comprehension.
I love that mindset. It's about embracing the journey and focusing on the positive aspects of language learning. So we've talked about finding the right podcast, but how do we move beyond just passively listening and actually make the most of these audio treasures for language improvement?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the crucial concept of active listening. It's about engaging with the podcast, being present, and using specific techniques to maximize your learning potential.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this active listening approach. What makes it different from just pressing play and letting the words wash over me?
Active listening is about transforming the listening experience from a passive activity into an interactive learning session. It's about setting intentions, asking questions, and using strategies to deepen your understanding and retention of the language. One of the most powerful active listening techniques is setting a clear purpose before you even hit play.
Oh, I like that. It's like having a mission in mind, a reason for listening beyond just entertainment.
Exactly. Ask yourself what you want to get out of this particular episode. Are you hoping to pick up new vocabulary related to a specific topic? Do you want to focus on understanding a certain grammar point? Or maybe you're aiming to get accustomed to a particular accent or speaking style.
Having that intention in mind helps you focus your attention and listen more selectively. It's like searching for gems in a treasure chest. You know what you're looking for, so you're more likely to spot those sparkling insights.
And along those lines, another helpful technique is prediction.
Prediction. Tell me more about how that works in the context of language learning.
So before you start listening, take a moment to look at the episode title. Think about the topic. What kind of vocabulary might come up? What are some potential discussion points? What questions might the host ask?
It's like warming up your brain muscles before a workout. You're activating your prior knowledge and getting your mind ready to process the incoming information.
Precisely. By engaging in this pre-listening prediction, you're priming your brain to be on the lookout for specific words, phrases, and ideas. It's like giving your brain a treasure map before you set off on the adventure.
And that makes the listening experience more engaging and interactive. Instead of just passively absorbing information, you're actively searching for clues and making connections.
And once you're in the thick of listening, don't be afraid to embrace the power of repetition.
Ah, yes, repetition, language learner's best friend. But let's be real, sometimes listening to the same episode multiple times can feel a bit tedious. How do we make it more engaging and effective?
Well, instead of simply replaying the entire episode from start to finish, try focusing on different aspects each time. The first time through, aim for general comprehension. Get a sense of the main ideas and the overall flow of the conversation.
Okay, so it's like getting the lay of the land, understanding the big picture.
Exactly. Then, on your second listen, focus on specific vocabulary. Jot down any new words or phrases that catch your ear. Look them up if needed and try to understand how they're used in context.
This is where that vocabulary journal comes in handy. It's like building a personal dictionary of words and phrases that you've encountered in authentic settings.
And on your third listen, you can go even deeper. Pay attention to the speaker's intonation, the rhythm of their speech, the way they stress certain words or phrases.
It's like having a private pronunciation lesson. You're tuning in to the subtle nuances of spoken English that can really elevate your fluency.
And don't be afraid to mimic the speaker. Try repeating phrases or sentences out loud, paying attention to your pronunciation and intonation. It's like shadowing a master chef in the kitchen. You're observing their techniques and trying to replicate them to improve your own skills.
Oh, I love that analogy. It makes language learning feel less like a chore and more like an exciting culinary adventure.
Mm.
And speaking of adventure, sometimes when we're listening to podcasts, we encounter unfamiliar words or phrases that can trip us up.
Those mystery words, they can be both frustrating and intriguing. But instead of panicking or immediately reaching for a dictionary, try putting on your detective hat and using context clues to crack the case.
Ooh, I love a good mystery.
Hmm.
So how do we channel our inner Sherlock Holmes when it comes to deciphering unknown words in podcasts?
Pay attention to the surrounding words, the overall topic of the conversation, the speaker's tone of voice. Often you can deduce the meaning of a word based on these contextual hints without even needing a dictionary.
It's like solving a puzzle. You're gathering clues, piecing together information, and using your deductive reasoning skills to arrive at the solution.
Right.
And the more you practice this skill, the better you'll become at inferring meaning from context, which is a valuable skill not just for language learning, but for comprehension in general.
It's like training your brain to be a more agile and adaptable learner. You're not just memorizing definitions, you're developing the ability to understand language in its natural habitat, which is much more rewarding and effective.
And speaking of effectiveness, we've been focusing on listening as a primary way to learn English with podcasts. But these audio gems can also be powerful tools for improving our speaking and writing skills.
Oh, that's right.
Ooh, all ears. How do we go beyond passive listening and start using podcasts to actively enhance our speaking and writing abilities?
Let's start with speaking. One of the most effective techniques is imitation. Choose a short segment from a podcast that you find particularly engaging or challenging.
Maybe a sentence or two that showcases a specific pronunciation point or a phrase that I want to master.
Exactly. Listen to that segment multiple times, paying close attention to the speaker's pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm. Then try to mimic it as accurately as possible. Record yourself if you can, and listen back to compare your pronunciation to the original.
It's like having a personalized pronunciation coach right in your earbuds. You can practice specific sounds work on your intonation and gradually refine your accent.
And once you've gotten comfortable with imitating individual segments, you can take it a step further with role-playing.
Role-playing, that sounds fun. Tell me more about how we can incorporate that into our podcast language learning routine.
Okay. So after listening to an episode, choose a character or a perspective that you find interesting. Imagine yourself in that situation and try to recreate the conversation either by yourself or with a language partner.
It's like improvisational acting for language learners. You're putting yourself in real-life scenarios, thinking on your feet, and using the language actively to express yourself.
Right, and it's a great way to build confidence and fluency in a more relaxed and controlled environment. You're not under the pressure of having to come up with completely original dialogue. You're drawing inspiration from the podcast and adapting it to your own creative spin.
And speaking of creativity, how can we leverage podcasts to improve our writing skills?
Well, podcasts can be fantastic resources for writing practice, especially for developing skills like summarization, vocabulary expansion, and reflective writing.
Okay, let's break those down one by one. Starting with summarization. How exactly does summarizing a podcast help us become better writers?
Imagine you've just listened to a fascinating podcast episode filled with insights and information. Your task is to condense that information into a clear and concise summary using your own words.
So it's not about copying the podcast verbatim. It's about understanding the key points and expressing them in a way that's both accurate and engaging.
Precisely. This exercise forces you to think critically, identify the most important ideas, and organize them in a logical and coherent manner. It's like creating a mental map of the episode.
And the more you practice this skill, the better you'll become at distilling complex information into its essence, which is a valuable skill for any type of writing, whether it's academic essays, business reports, or even creative storytelling.
Absolutely. Summarization helps you develop clarity, conciseness, and the ability to synthesize information effectively. And while you're summarizing, you'll also be reinforcing the vocabulary and grammar you've encountered in the podcast.
It's like a double whammy of language learning benefits.
Yeah.
You're improving your writing skills while simultaneously expanding your vocabulary and solidifying your grammar knowledge.
That's right.
And speaking of vocabulary, another helpful writing activity is keeping a vocabulary journal. As you listen to podcasts, jot down any new words or phrases that pique your interest.
Yeah.
I've always loved the idea of a vocabulary journal. It's like creating a personal treasure chest of words and expressions that I've discovered along my language learning journey.
And don't just write down the word itself. Try to use it in a sentence or even a short paragraph to solidify your understanding of its meaning and how it's used in context. You can also add notes about its pronunciation, synonyms, antonyms, or any other interesting tidbits that help you remember it.
It's like taking your vocabulary journal from a simple list of words to a rich tapestry of language exploration. You're not just memorizing definitions, you're weaving those words into your own linguistic fabric.
And to make your vocabulary journal even more engaging, consider adding visual elements like drawings, diagrams, or mind maps. The more senses you engage, the better your brain will retain that information.
Oh, I love that idea. It's about making language learning multisensory and personalized. Instead of just relying on rote memorization, you're creating a vibrant and interactive learning experience that caters to your individual learning style.
And finally, don't underestimate the power of reflective writing. After listening to a podcast episode, take some time to jot down your thoughts, opinions, or any questions that the episode sparked.
It's like having a conversation with a podcast even after it's over. You're engaging with the ideas, forming your own perspectives, and expressing yourself in writing.
Reflective writing helps you connect the podcast's content to your own life, your own experiences, and your own ideas. It's a way to personalize the learning process and make it more meaningful.
And it's a fantastic opportunity to practice expressing yourself in English, developing your own voice and style in writing. It's about going beyond simply understanding the language to using it as a tool for communication and self-expression.
Absolutely. So we've explored a wide range of active listening techniques and ways to leverage podcasts for speaking and writing practice. But how do we make all of this a consistent part of our language learning routine?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Life gets busy, distractions pop up, and it's easy to let those good intentions slip away. How do we ensure that podcasts become a regular and integral part of our language learning journey?
That's what we'll be diving into next. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground about active listening techniques and how to use podcasts to boost speaking and writing skills. But let's be honest, life gets in the way sometimes. How do we make sure podcasts don't just become another app gathering dust on our phones?
Well, I think a lot of people, fall into the trap of thinking they need to dedicate hours each day to language learning, which can feel really daunting. But the truth is, even short bursts of like 10 to 15 minutes can be incredibly beneficial.
That's so reassuring for our busy listeners. It's not about finding huge chunks of time. It's about those little pockets in our day that we can transform into like mini language learning sessions.
Exactly. Think about your daily routine. Do you have a commute? Do you work out? Do you spend time cooking or cleaning? These are all like prime podcast listening opportunities.
Yeah. It's about turning those everyday tasks into chances to learn. It's like multitasking for the brain.
And speaking of multitasking, our brains are actually wired to make connections. So if you consistently pair a particular podcast with a specific activity, it can become almost automatic. Like, I always listen to my favorite business podcast while I'm walking my dog. It's become a ritual.
It's like building a positive association. You start to look forward to both the activity and the learning that comes with it.
And that's where the power of habit comes in. When something becomes a habit, it requires less willpower and effort.
It becomes part of your routine rather than something you have to force yourself to do.
Exactly. And to make those habits stick, setting specific goals can be incredibly helpful. Instead of just saying, I want to listen to more podcasts, make it measurable and achievable.
So instead of just aiming for more, I can set a goal to listen to one full episode every day, or maybe I challenge myself to learn 5 new words from each episode. Whatever works for me, but make it concrete and trackable.
Exactly. Because what gets measured gets managed. It's like having a language learning roadmap. You know where you're going, and you can see how far you've come, which can be incredibly motivating.
And to track that progress, I'm a big fan of keeping a listening journal. I jot down the podcasts that I've listened to, new words or phrases I've learned, and any thoughts or reflections that come up during the episode.
That's a great idea. It's like a treasure chest of your language learning journey. It's a tangible record of your efforts and progress, which can be really inspiring to look back on.
Especially on those days when you might be feeling less motivated. You can open up your listening journal and see all the amazing work you've already done. It's a reminder that you're capable of achieving your language goals.
And don't forget the social aspect of language learning. If you have friends or classmates who are also learning English, consider starting a podcast club.
That's a great idea. You can choose episodes to listen to together, and then meet up to discuss your thoughts, share new vocabulary you've learned, and practice speaking English in a fun and supportive environment.
Right. It's like having a built-in accountability system. Plus, it adds a social element to language learning, which can make it more enjoyable and engaging.
And speaking of enjoyable and engaging, we can't wrap up this episode without giving a shout out to the Speak Smart podcast itself. It's a fantastic resource for English learners, with episodes covering a wide range of topics and techniques.
They really do a great job of making language learning accessible and fun, which is exactly what we're all about.
Absolutely. So, if you're looking for a podcast to add to your language learning routine, be sure to check out Speak Smart. You won't be disappointed.
And remember, the key takeaway here is that podcasts are a powerful tool for improving your English fluency. They're accessible, flexible, and incredibly engaging.
So, dear listeners, what podcast will you choose to embark on your language learning adventure?
Happy listening.
Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button.